Hi, Joe Sallen here from the Sallen Coefficient, also host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, and co-host of The Long View. I'm here to tell you guys about Vanuatu. This will be a review with a brief walkthrough. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, and what I really try to do in these videos is tell you whether or not it's worth the time and effort you're going to spend learning the game in terms of how much enjoyment, which for me tends to be strategic depth out of the length of the experience. So what is the relationship of the weight of the game, the time that you're going to spend taking your turns and playing the game, versus how much depth and how much interesting interaction there is in the game. Vanuatu is a game that came out in 2011, and it was designed by Alain Epron. It is a worker placement auction game that's set in an island chain. You're going to be exploring the island as the game goes on, though that's kind of done fixed every turn by the first player. And it has a reputation for being quite a brutal game. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on whether or not I feel Vanuatu is worth your time. I'll give you a few other bits of information here and there. Like I said, a brief walkthrough. And here, before I get started, please, I wanted to give just a thank you to my sponsor, which is Game Surplus. They bring the world of board games to you. They have a great website now. They just got updated with a new server. They're really growing, and Carmen's doing a great job supporting amazing content producers like Heavy Cardboard. And if you like this video, you can show your support for me by going to Game Surplus. So they help out with giving me games. This is a game that I've got to do, but not from game. Well, I didn't get this from the publisher. It was kind of like I got it for my sponsorship. So in any way, I don't have anything personally, no relationship with the sponsor or anything like that, no bias that way. I'm just kind of hyper correct on it right now because my podcast is just an episode on ethics and bias, and I'm kind of sick on standing on my knees right now. So I'm going to go behind us, and we'll do a quick walk through the game, and I'll tell you about Vanuatu. Okay, Vanuatu is an island game where you're going to be moving around this little ship to take actions on the board, and the actions are all driven by a sort of auction. There is 9 different spots up here at the top of the board, and on your turn, in turn order, the first thing you do is first player places 2 of them, and you can do 2 on the same spot or 1 on one spot and 1 on a different spot. And then you'll keep on doing that once around. You'll do the same thing again, place 2 more. They can go in the same spot or different spots. You can add to a previous amount of workers. And then in the last round, you just place 1. Everybody always has 5 of these action discs, and you're going to then, after you're done with this, go around in turn order, starting with the first player, and the first player will resolve one place where they have a majority, which is broken in favor of turn order. So most pieces broken in favor of turn order after that. So if you are stuck and don't have any spots that you can take or have no actions you want to take, you are still required to remove a disc from a place that you are winning. And if you're winning nowhere, you have to remove a disc without taking that action from one of the places that you have discs. Before you do any of this, you're going to choose a bonus for the round, which is these little tiles. If you've ever played Terra Mystica, it's kind of similar to that. And then the actions you can do involve moving your boat around to be next to islands. And these islands are going to have spots where you can do things on them, like making sand paintings, building huts. Everything here, though, is like point salad. It's all going to be getting you points in some way or another. There are some little differences between how you get points and whether or not you can get points at this particular time. Like, for example, you can get treasure. Those are points at the end of the game, but they can always be turned in for money without taking an action. Fish have to be sold to take an action, but you're going to be fishing, reducing the contents on the board. So as you fish, there will be less fish. As you find treasure, there will be less treasure. And then the game board will grow out to include new islands that have different combinations of the same things you find on the basic island. Whenever you gain money in the game, it's done on this public track. If you ever gain too much money, meaning 10 bucks, you will lose all of it, but you get 5 points. So it's kind of like you turn a bunch of points into money, or money into points rather, but that's kind of out of your control. You'll be putting tourists on islands, which help you with when your huts are out there, they score for tourists. And basically you keep doing this for 8 whole rounds, and then at the end of 8 rounds, whoever has the most points after some endgame scoring is the winner. It's a brief walkthrough of Vanuatu, and now let me get kicked off with my thoughts. So, first thing about Vanuatu is you are very far away right now, so you're probably having a hard time seeing anything that I was describing. Well, it probably doesn't hurt to be there, because where you are sitting right now is probably about how far away you have to be able to see the board in a game of Vanuatu. And you might notice that the art of this game is absolutely gorgeous. It's a new addition from Quined Games here with art by Konstantin Wolfwinkel. Anyway, it is an absolutely gorgeous game. The colors just pop right out, and the different spots on the board kind of have the same thing that was done with Village, which is that they are style over substance, meaning that they look cool, but they're really kind of ambiguous if you're trying to learn the game. Like the place that you put these export shipping tiles has postcards of ships, but they're not sized to be the same as these tiles, so you're just kind of throwing these out there willy-nilly sort of, and you get them kind of close. So it's a little bit difficult, and the most egregious offense of this style over substance artwork is one that I have to come here, and hopefully it will be able to be visible. So this tile right here is an ocean island tile, and it is, yes, of course, incredibly blurry, but you can see those very light outlines. Those are incredibly important. Those are spots that you can do sand drawings that are worth points. The little squares right here, so the little black outlines, those are where you can build huts. Yeah, you can barely see them right here, and I can barely see them standing all the way across the table. So for as beautiful as the game is, it is extremely difficult to see things from across the table because of this art style. So something that really looks cool and works great if you already are familiar with the game, but learning the game is certainly a struggle. So one of the worst offenders, though, is there's a little help chart on the board, and there's an artistic crate that has shadow that obstructs the view of this chart so that you can't even tell what colored cubes sell for what. So, I mean, it just really beautiful artwork. Looks so great on my shelf. My favorite box art in the entire industry. But in this game, the art is really not functional in a lot of ways. It's functional once you know the game, but it's not functional to start with. I never want to criticize a game for symbology, because I know language independence is an incredibly important thing to be able to get more groups of people into the hobby. But in this case, some of the symbology is actually relying on the artwork, and the artwork is not that clear. Especially when you've got two different boats here. You can't see them at all, I know, in the video, but there's two boats. One of them has a person holding a tiny fishing pole. The other one has a bunch of people, which, if you get close enough, look like the tourists in the game, which are definitely ethnically profiled. Anyway, the hut building, though, the hut building just has some guys building huts, but the hut building's iconography just says $3. It doesn't say anything about it building huts in the iconography. It relies entirely on the art, which is problematic. And then over here, you actually have an iconography of a hut, but that's not even the hut building action. That's the tourist action, which allows you to get money for every hut on the island you send a tourist to. Anyway, my frustrations with the art, they've been talked about now. The theme itself really does come across, as much as this little boat that you've got, this little wooden boat, is going to be traveling on ocean tiles and then adjacent to island tiles to take actions. That, to me, is really what places this thematically, because the rest of the game is very much a point salad game. So let's talk about what's going on in the game, and then I'll eventually get to my Sallen Coefficient, where I give this one a rating of how much it's worth your time, of how much, for impatient people like myself that are looking for the most strategy that you can pack into a short experience where you can play it over and over and over, get good at it, play it with your friends. I'll get to that point. Right now, let's talk about the character selection in the game. So that's the first thing you do every round. And this character selection is actually not even considered part of the advanced game. But to me, it's really, really crucial that you have this, because they're interesting. They give you a way to make each round different. And without them, it just, to me, would be losing quite a bit for the expert variant. So anyway, to me, it seems like it'd be a beginner variant to play without them. But yeah, the game is too hard, apparently. So they do things like give you points to do certain actions. They give you money to do certain actions. They basically broadcast or make it possible for other players to predict what you want to do on your turn, and then that lets people plan accordingly at the start of the round, which I really do enjoy that. The abilities are kind of, I mean, they're good. They're mixtures of points, and I don't feel like all of them are entirely balanced, but they do tend to be like the harder ones to get to go off tend to give you more points. But there's one of them, like the one where you get to sell an extra cube, it can be worth like up to 7 extra points if you can get it to go off right, or 5 extra points. And I feel like there's a couple of them that are like that, and then the other ones that give you points are only like 2 or 3 points at most. So I do feel like that some of the tiles are definitely ones that I feel like people just always had, whereas other tiles didn't get chosen all that much. But I'm never that much of an expert in the game to be able to say that it's imbalanced. I would say that it seems like the easier activities tend to give you less of a reward. So there's that. Character selection, though, very enjoyable part of the game, something I really did like here, something that really adds quite a bit to Vanuatu, but it's not the main draw. The main draw is the action selection system that I described. The action selection system where you're going to be placing these discs. And when you place these discs, it is very intentional that there is 2 discs placed at once, because it's not just a regular auction. If we went around placing 1 disc at a time, the first person in each spot would be able to continue to increase their bid and make sure they get it, because nobody gets any more than the 5 discs that you have. However, because you place 2, that means that if I want to spread myself out and take multiple actions, later people in turn order can jump on that and guarantee that they'll get to do it. Now, the cool thing about it still, though, is that I have some flexibility if my actions are all over the place, because on my turn, I have to remove 1 of them, and if I have the majority, I can take that action. Now, if somebody removes their discs that were blocking me, I can now take the action. So it's not like a worker placement like Agricola. In Agricola, if you take an action, that's it. It's your action. Nobody else can do that for the rest of the round. It's very much a final thing. In Vanuatu, it's like, well, you get to do that first. And it's like I start thinking about what I'm going to do with my turn now that I know you're going first. How do I make the best out of the situation? So that, to me, this action selection system, these 2 discs everywhere, my favorite part of the game. It is awesome. It is something to try in Vanuatu if you have the opportunity. Even if you're not interested in the rest of the stuff going on in the game, the action selection system is incredibly interesting, and I very highly recommend that part of the game. So next up, let's talk about more comparisons to Agricola. First of all, in Agricola, you've got actions that are starting, and then every single round another action gets added, to the point that at the end of the game there's more actions that are available now. There's 14 new actions that weren't at the beginning of the game, so there's even more new actions than there were at the start of the game, if that makes sense. Here in Vanuatu, the actions are totally static. They do not change at all. And as you are playing the game, depending on the tiles that come out that are going to get added to the island chain, that's going to determine whether or not you can even do some of these actions. And you're never allowed to do an action if you can't legally execute it. You can never just block somebody from what they're going to do if you can't do it yourself. So because of that, this feels very, very static. I feel like I want there to be new actions. I want there to be things that happen that change the game as it goes on. I feel like there's so much of just rinse and repeat in Vanuatu, especially since you play for 8 rounds. 8 rounds is ridiculous. Anyway, let's get to that later. So let me address one of the main sort of elephants in the room here with Vanuatu. I have personally lost somebody I considered a very good friend, and I would blame it on an experience that was had during a game of Vanuatu. I do not blame the game for that experience, though, and I honestly feel like that player that got so upset was really misinterpreting the game system. And that's because, as I mentioned before, in Vanuatu, there's actions that you can take after you've been outbid. And if you go first, breaking ties doesn't mean that you're the big head honcho and get to do whatever you want. You still have to place 2 discs if you want to guarantee yourself an action. But if you go later in turn order, you can see what everybody else has done and guarantee yourself an action by placing 2 on any spot that doesn't have 2. It just is a part of this system. And to me, like, the intentional design of that means that you're not going to get screwed out of actions. It's not that cutthroat, because you can know what people are going to do and you can work around them. Like, I know what people are going to do. Like, when it becomes my last action of the round, when I'm putting out a disc, I'm looking at everybody else's stacks and I'm thinking, okay, well, it looks like he's going to move first, and I can see he's going to pick up treasure. And I know that he's going to move before he picks up treasure because I look at where he is on the board and he can't pick up any treasure until he moves. So I can know, well, he's going to do that first. So I can put mine there, and I'm going to get to do that after him because he goes before me and he has to do that first. So there's so many things that you can like read into what other players are doing. Whereas in Agricola, a lot of it involves you looking at their board, looking at the cards that they have, and then looking at what's available on the public board. And those cards really do obstruct what you can know other players are going to do. And they make it so that there's a lot of hidden information, which some players don't like. And in Vanuatu, there's no hidden information. You don't have to worry about that at all. It really is just everything is out and you can plan as a result of it. So call it cutthroat if you will. You can think around it. And if you think that it's just a mean game and people can do mean things, then you're not really giving Vanuatu it's what it deserves in terms of looking at its system and how you can think around it. Okay, you cannot come to this with a fixed mindset. You need to come to it with a growth mindset because yes, people can obstruct you, but the game allows you to move around it. And the obstruction feels fair. It feels like they were able to take advantage of a situation on the board and use their late turn order, which the advantage there is the certainty, to kind of trump your early turn order tie-breaking power. So to me, it's just all part of the system, and it's not that cutthroat. It really isn't. And if you get blocked on an action, you can't do it right away, do something else. Start thinking about what else you can do, because otherwise you really are letting Vanuatu and your players that have blocked you get the best of you. Now, there's situations that can arise, especially with one specific promo character that allows you to shift your actions to kind of like screw with people's plans. And this one you might not want to include in your game. But this is the only tile that I really think allows you to do mean things to other players. Aside from that, all that you're doing is playing the game. Really, like, you got to use what tools you have. And so if somebody thinks that you're hurting them by taking an action, well, that's because you wanted the action. Anyway, that's my main thing about the cutthroat nature of Vanuatu, and I do not feel it is really that cutthroat of a game. It just has some interesting interaction. Now, on to the actual actions. So many people maybe have played like Lords of Waterdeep or Stone Age, and in Vanuatu, you are going to be taking actions that I would consider just a hair more complex than in Lords of Waterdeep or Stone Age. It's not as simple as get a resource, turn it in for X amount of points. It is, instead of that, it's kind of like the scoring can evolve as the game goes on. Some things are fixed. So if I get fish, I can sell them for money. And remember, I said that money can be turned into points. Well, it kind of has to be in certain situations. But as the round goes on, when I sell fish, that's going to be worth less and less for everybody that's done that. So the same kind of idea with the tourists and huts. It's not just like worth so many points. I put a hut out, and now it depends on how many tourists end up on that island for how many points I get at the end of the game. So it really is more evolving than something like, say, Lords of Waterdeep, where you've just got fixed amounts and people kind of move up incrementally, and that doesn't really change as the game goes on, which I do find interesting. So the actions here remind me more of like a Stefan Feld game, and it's like a point salad in that aspect. I can export beef for 5 points, but it costs me $3. I can export the coconuts for 3 points, and it costs me $2. And it's just, that's that part of the game. Now I go over here, and I can get money for my fish. Money, of course, can be used to build huts, which score me points. I can get treasure tiles, which are worth 2 points each. Oh, and the most simple thing in the game, I can build these little sand drawings, and they're just straight up worth 3 points. And that's it. It's just like you get points, and there's not even any steps between that. So I guess in some aspects it's a little bit more simple. There is one character that lets you have some more points for your sand drawings, but it's definitely not a huge part of the game. So it's just like a step more than Lords of Waterdeep, but it has this action selection system that really does scratch an itch for me in terms of an interactive worker placement auction style bidding Euro game. So anyway, that's my thoughts on kind of the actions. They're not that terribly interesting. You do have to move your boat, and that's the manipulation of where you're at, because that you have to be next to one of your huts to be able to sell fish. You have to be next to an island to be able to take actions for that island, and you have to be on top of the tile to do anything fishing or treasure gathering wise. And I do think that the movement is interesting. However, my main criticism, regardless of whether or not you feel that Vanuatu sounds like it's for you or not for you, Vanuatu has a problem. And that is how long it goes on. It goes on for 8 rounds. And in this game, the game does not change in a meaningful way at any point during those 8 rounds. The islands that grow out are going to consist of the same things that are on the starting island. The same way with the treasure tiles that go on these oceans, they are not going to change. And generally, depending on whether or not you're playing with players that are getting to do their actions, are actually using the game system and seeing how it works and getting it to work for them, if that happens in Vanuatu, like it did in my last game of Vanuatu, full disclosure, I've played this game 2 times, as well as another kind of pseudo play to try to figure out how it went. And in the first game, people really struggled. And I think that it was just that it wasn't as experienced gamers. So know that if you're less experienced, you're going to struggle. But I think the struggle is what's really cool about it. With more experienced gamers, there was no struggle because we just all saw what everybody was going to do. We all moved to that spot, and we all took that action, and we basically made sure that at the end of every turn, the only things left on the board were like incredibly minor, like single fishing areas, which aren't that great. So all the good actions were being taken every single round. And the worst problem with that is that once you hit round 5, I think every player at the table is starting to get kind of ready for the game to end. You're like, it's, you know, the new tiles that get put out are so far away that it'd take me 2 turns to even move to them. The new tiles that are coming out don't have anything that they don't have anything all that great. Some of them are only open water. And the game doesn't meaningfully change. Like the same things that you're scoring points for in round 1 are not going to change that much in round 2. And you're really making these decisions very tactically. Maybe 2 rounds is the most you'll spend planning actions. You'll get something in round 1 and use it in round 2, but you're never going to be thinking about what you're doing in round 5 in round 1. Just the tactical nature of how the game grows and the fact that so many things are made available just in time for you to be able to start planning for them, maybe a round in advance. So, and that's by design, but I think that's something to consider. Do you like your game to have more tactical reactions, or do you want it to have more strategic depth? And you're looking for a long strategic game. Do not look for it here in Vanuatu. Don't expect it. You'll find some more tactical. This part is tactical. The board is tactical. It's all very tactical. But this game, at about round 6, the actions just dried up on the board. They were just gone. And in round 7, it was literally where we had 2 actions of these 9 that were not going to happen for the rest of the game. They were never going to happen. So they were literally impossible. And then in round 8, 2 more actions weren't going to happen because there was no more fish left in the game and there was no more fish to sell. We got to the point where in round 8, instead of the normal feeling I'd like in a Euro game where it ends and I'm like, oh, I can't do the things I wanted to do. In this game, it's like it feels like the game ends and you're playing on and on and on. It feels kind of like you're listening to a song on the radio and the fade out starts to happen, but the song goes on for another 2 minutes. And that's just unacceptable. I really like the things going on in Vanuatu, but I cannot stand how long the game lasts. 8 rounds, no. Maybe 5 or 6 rounds. Even in those 5 or 6 rounds, I would like to see something that changes the availability of tiles and something that adds maybe a different way of scoring to sort of more prioritize, like giving people opportunities to jump on scoring now that aren't opportunities that are pretty much always available just because they're core parts of the game. So I think that it's very much what feels like a game that could use an expansion to make me continue to be interested in it. But even with an expansion, I don't want it to go on as long as it does. There is one small expansion in the game that I, as a reviewer, maybe I should play it, but I've read the rules and I can tell you right now, all it's going to do is make it so that the actions start to sink away even before the game ends, which just to me seems ridiculous. And it has a semi-cooperative variant or aspect to it where islands start sinking underneath and anybody who has huts and stuff built on them will lose points. All the points they have for the end of the game will go away, but there's no incentive for other players to really do anything about it. So in that aspect, it has nothing that I think would make this game more interesting to me. What I think would make it more interesting is more of these tiles, maybe making the tiles available in a different sort of like format than just everything is all up there all the time and you just can't take the same one twice in a row. I also would like to see more different types of island tiles that start to add new and interesting types of scoring. Maybe other things where you can like start snowball scoring as the game goes on, because there really isn't any snowball scoring in this game. You're never rewarded. There's nothing that you can do that would make you more rewarded for the rest of the game for any of the one actions. And that's what makes it feel so tactical, that you're not like, okay, well, I get the secret goal where I want to build all these sand paintings. and maybe there's something, you know, kind of like TWA does, where it's secret goals that everybody can score. There's nothing like that here. It's just you score a certain amount of points, and then there's nothing else you can do. So those are my main points here. Let me just check here to make sure that I've covered everything that I said I was going to. The theme itself, really beautiful island artwork, and if that's what you're coming for, I think you'll find it. People call it a cutthroat game, but hopefully with what I've said before, you understand that, you know, the system itself involves a lot of workarounds. So maybe you feel offended by somebody taking your action, but they're using their, you know, what the game has given them, if they're late in turn order, to certainly take an action from you. And you got to accept that. You got to accept that you spread yourself out, and now you've got to use the flexibility of having actions everywhere to make sure that you can at least do something with each of them. But there's lots of different things that you can do as long as you don't hit the roadblock of I'm messed over, I can't do anything. So I really do love, though, the way the game looks, except for how dysfunctional the artwork is. So that's really the main thing. Now it's time for me to give my Sallen Coefficient to Vanuatu. And I debated between a couple of different numbers here, and I try to keep it to whole numbers. So I'm going to say that Vanuatu earns a 6. It feels kind of like a bit of a low 6, just because it really does keep players at the table longer than they should. It should be a higher scoring game. There's enough tools in here to be able to make this game just with a few added actions. I really could see it getting, you know, if it got like the Lignum treatment got from Capstone Games, where they added an extra expansion, I think that would be really, really cool, especially, you know, maybe they're going to listen to this because they are going to be reprinting the game here in the United States. They're going to be handling the North American distribution. Maybe they'll do something cool with that. Anyway, I would just give this one a 6 because I love the system here, and this action selection is really cool, but it does not meaningfully change as the game goes on. And if you feel like you're especially a heavy gamer, maybe you think that you're heavier than me, if you know my taste profile from other games I've said that I really like, I really love Agricola, then maybe you'd even lower that because, you know, very, very tactical here. If you are looking for a game that looks pretty and offers you some interesting decisions in a system that allows you to heavily interact with each other, but then really doesn't just make it forced take that. There's not really a take that element. It's always like the game rules prohibit you from doing something just to hurt somebody. You have to have a benefit for yourself. And that to me is just a part of the game system, and it works in this way. This interaction is really uncharacteristic for, to me, in my opinion, for how well that interaction works in a Euro. So if those things sound great, then maybe Vanuatu is even more for you than it is for me. I personally really, really enjoyed it, but I just, like I said, things are holding it back from making me really keep it high in my standing. And for that reason, it's got a 6 on the Sallen Coefficient, and my own personal rating would be actually a little bit lower than that because I want to see more variety than Vanuatu adds. And that's just kind of what I look for. Replayability is a big thing to me that's not really figured into the coefficient, so that's why it gets a little bit of a lower rating for me personally. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Vanuatu, and I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that you catch my other videos called the Sallen Coefficient. Here I'm really looking at giving in-depth critical analysis of board games, and I'm not going to be doing a ton of post-production because this is the stuff that I love doing. I love talking about these games. I love showing you. I'll do these types of walkthroughs. I hope that this was helpful to add a little bit of a walkthrough here. And I honestly hope that you'll comment and let me know in the comments whether or not you like this style better. I did a couple of other reviews, Not Alone I've done, and I also did one on Cottage Garden, and those ones took an awful lot of time. And what I've noticed is they didn't really get as many views as some of my other videos. So I'm thinking like, well, maybe I should just stick to a style that I enjoy and do what I love. So you tell me if you think that you appreciated the walkthrough and you like this style. If you think that there's things that I can improve in just this video style, please let me know. Check out the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly board game podcast. I host it. We record live every Thursday night. It'll go on to iTunes about a week after that or so in kind of more finished form. Also, I just hope you guys have a great time gaming, and check out the next Sallen Coefficient video. Subscribe to these YouTube videos, and I will catch you around. Have a great week of gaming, or whatever, however long you're going to be gaming for, and I'll catch you on the next Sallen Coefficient video.